What up, y'all? Welcome into the Skolcial Network back on our usual Friday time slot. Brev, I already mentioned this before the show, but the hair's looking spicy. It's looking good. You got that pure flow state going down.
Yeah, and this is my day off hair, which is for whatever reason way better than my work day hair. Because when I don't do anything to it, it looks nicer. Thanks for
What?
the hickey, by the way. You left that on me last night, so.
We're gonna ignore that, but what do you do to your What do you, I've never even seen you do anything with your hair.
Sometimes, I mean, there's very low variance. So sometimes I will take a shower. And sometimes when I do that, which is not often, I put sea salt spray in it, and it kind of holds it to be. Because if
Pro
I,
tip.
a lot of times if I do absolutely nothing to it, it'll be crazy. But of course, today it's just like drop dead. So
My one of my best friends growing up, Stefan, you put me on to sea salt spray. It doesn't really matter now because I shaved my head, but
yeah.
that's a goat move. Before Brev, we talk about what we're going to do today. Just want to thank everybody for last week. I think it's our most viewed or second most viewed episode now, having Phil Mackey on. Obviously, we're still an upstart podcast on that we're lucky enough to get picked up by Vikes now, which has been doing great things. But thank you guys for that. Definitely encouraging. Seemed like you guys enjoyed it. And shockingly, nobody yelled at Phil or us too much in the comments, which I thought was. We got a couple Twitter replies that were a little
Mm.
snarky, but I think I was pleasantly surprised. People seem to enjoy it and not be argumentative.
Yeah, I think there was one or two. Like, there was a comment about stop taking over these smaller podcasts, Phil. That was pretty funny. But I don't know if
That
it's
was funny.
sarcastic or not.
I
So
think it was sarcastic. Also, he didn't it's not like we opened up StreamYard and he was just here. That would have been a
yeah.
little weird. We did ask him. But Brev, you want to tell the people what we're gonna do today, inspired by I think I saw it from Dov Kleiman posted it from NFL Throwback, but it created an idea of something I thought we should discuss and you agreed. So what are we gonna be doing today?
We're going to be doing our Mount Rushmore of not just Vikings players, but Vikings associated individuals. So coaches, owners, general managers, also players, mascots. Um, and yeah, that's inspired by the discourse of, I don't even know who did it, but like they left Randy Moss off their Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So I don't know who I saw the aggregators get a hold of it, and then I think they credited NFL Throwback, which I think is a Twitter account. I don't know if it's
Hmm.
actually. I think it's run by the NFL. I
Yeah.
think it's just an excuse to post like nostalgic stuff, but
Yep.
I don't. Okay, well, I think we should address who's in their list because I have it here on my phone. It was Alan Page, Adrian Peterson, Fran Tarkenton, and Chris Carter, and I think I saw people get mad about pretty much everyone but Alan Page for one reason or another. I think some
Hmm.
people were arguing Foreman over AD. I saw people arguing Culpepper and Cousins over Fran, which I'm sure will come up at some point in this conversation. And then the Carter Moss argument, I understood both sides of it.
Hmm.
Longevity versus explosiveness, but I don't want to get too much into the reasoning because I'm sure we'll hear a couple of those names, if not all of them, come up. Because in totality, we're going to snake draft this baby, and Brev and I should each have four individual players and or people associated with the team. Oh, that is totally embarrassing. Turned on the wrong banner. We got to delete our
Gotcha.
banners sometimes, dude.
Gotcha.
And that's not even for this show. That is
Hmm.
for Vikes now. But yes, the
It
Vikings
is.
did reveal their winter whiteout jerseys, and I have mine in my closet right now. But with that in mind, we're going to share our screen for the first time ever as a franchise. Love the black background. Brev, I'm going to
Hmm.
be kind to you and let you pick heads or tails to see who goes first, because with this being a draft, we want to make sure we take advantage of positioning here.
As much as I love head, tails never fails.
All right. Well, with that logic, can't beat that. And turns out you are correct. So,
Mm.
with that in mind, I think I know the direction you're going. Go ahead. Who's your first person on Vikings Mount Rushmore?
Just for clarity, snake draft for those that don't know. I will be picking first overall. Jason will get the next two, so on and so forth. So pretty easy 1-1. When you think Minnesota Viking, even if you're young like us, I'm Well, you're not really young. You're kind of old, but like I'm young. I'm
The
24.
hell?
Even and I guess as time goes on, it'll be a little bit less like this. But when you think Minnesota Viking in a historical sense, you think of a 90-year-old man walking out onto the field in 2015 in negative 30-degree wind chill with a polo on with no warmth, cold protection on at
Reminds
all.
me of a tweet I sent the other day, by the way,
Does.
reminiscing of that moment
Very
specifically.
true. Very true. Use code Brev on SeatGeek for $28 off your first purchase. Bud Grant is the Minnesota Viking. I don't know if anybody else will ever replace him until like Kevin O'Connell wins the Super Bowl or whatever, then maybe we'll have a discussion. But in the context of everything he did, um, Bud Grant is. You think Minnesota Vikings, you think Bud Grant. So rest in peace to Bud Grant. He is easy 1-1.
I mean, look, that's the most clear number one pick possible. I can't think of a single coach on the Vikings other than hopefully 10 year from now Kevin O'Connell, right? That version of him in 2035 who's won a couple Super Bowls.
And he will probably
Who
look a little bit like Bud Grant.
have you seen the face comparison? Like
It's
the
really
some
scary.
symmetry, it's freaking weird. It's
Yeah.
like well, with that in mind, I'll pick my number one pick. So round one, pick two, who is synonymous with Bud Grant, even though they weren't together for a little while, mainly because of some Norm Van Brocklin, speaking of former coaches,
Mm,
making those decisions. By the way, if you haven't watched, I think it's Dorktown, isn't it? They did
hmm.
the history of the Minnesota Vikings. I think in totality it's about 7 or 8 hours.
It's great.
You need I cannot recommend something enough than to watch that. If you're anywhere like I am and it's too hot to go outside and do anything on the weekends, it's a great thing to turn on, watch a couple hours at a time. If you're really well informed maybe about the Vikings through the 90s up till today, but maybe know bits and pieces of the team's origins, this will just blow your mind. It's incredible. Can't speak highly enough. But Fran Tarkenton, I cannot believe people were complaining about him being on that original Mount Rushmore. What he did in revolutionizing the game, and he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Like, I think people forget that. I'm trying to think, Brev, what other Hall of Fame quarterbacks have played for the Vikings other than him and Favre? Because
Did Randall
Moon?
Cunningham go?
I don't remember. What about Warren Moon?
Warman, maybe. Archie Manning.
Okay. You know,
But
art,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but all of those were in extremely short stints with the
Yes.
Vikings. Like Fran Tarkenton revolutionized the game of football and the quarterback position years before anyone else really started doing it at the level he did. You talk to most NFL historians, they'll point out that between him and Michael Vick, you didn't quite have a player who relied as heavily, I should say, on their rushing ability at the quarterback position as those two did. Obviously, there were quarterbacks who knew how to scramble, things like that. I'm not saying no quarterbacks were mobile for 30 years.
Mm,
But as far as the amount of time they could buy in the pocket, it's the only comparison in modern time that really makes sense, even if it may be pretty different. He built the Vikings from the offensive identity that they had at a time where the defense really was the team's true identity. He stood up and made the offense respectable. And for that, I just highly recommend, if you've heard the name, you've seen some highlights here and there, watch that documentary. It'll really explain just how damn good this guy was. Fran Tarkenton, easily my number one choice since you took the obvious number one pick amongst anyone in Vikings
hmm.
history. Way to be cheap.
Thank you.
I'm just kidding. I would have done the exact same thing. Number two, I've had some. Why is my. I have a timer on my watch that's just going off
Hmm.
for no reason.
Hmm.
I've thought of a number of different ways to go about this, but I'm going to say Randy Moss. I am going to say Randy Moss, not for the fact that I necessarily think he contributed the most to the franchise. Not that I, obviously, he was here 5, 6 years in total, I think. something like
Mm,
that. It wasn't that
yeah.
long. And then if you add what the 1 or 2 games he played in 2010, that
Hmm.
was something else. When you think of the Minnesota Vikings in the last 30 years, the image that for anyone outside of the Vikings organization that pops up, if you're under 10, maybe it's Justin Jefferson hitting the gritty in Fortnite. I hate that I just said that sentence, but it's kind of true. But you think of that 98 through 2001, 2002 team with Randy Moss. You think of the mooning at Lambeau. You think of the Thanksgiving game. Hell, I just shout out to PacSun. I just got a random Instagram ad the other day of a Randy Moss, Mitchell and Ness Thanksgiving Day against the Cowboys shirt. I posted on my Twitter and it sold out of every size, I think, except small. So when you think of the Vikings, you think of Randy Moss in the modern era. Even though, in the grand scheme of things, those of us who are fans know he wasn't there that long, I have to say Randy Moss. I love Chris Carter. He was my dad's favorite player. He was here much longer, even though Randy went to what, Oakland, New England, back to Minnesota. Then it was Tennessee, and then the Niners. I think, was there another
Something
team
like
I'm
that.
missing?
He
I
played in that Super Bowl with San Fran. Fun fact.
Yeah, I was rooting for them simply so that he
Oh
could get a
yeah.
ring, but I gosh man, that really stuck with him. So my first 2 picks: Fran Tarkenton, Randy Moss. Over to you.
Great picks. And to touch on Randy Moss, pause. Like if you were overly upset either way about having him on or off the list, you should probably build a bridge because like it's a fine argument either way.
Mhm.
When you're looking at greatest Vikings, maybe in a sense of being on the Vikings, you can argue he's not up there, but he's the best single football player ever to play for the Minnesota Vikings. So like for that reason alone, I don't I I don't want to say it's not close, but I think it's kind of clear just from
There's
like
2 arguments to be made there, I'd
yeah,
say. As
yeah,
far as offensive weapons, I won't even
sure.
go with defense because defense opens up a whole nother thing. But I'd
Hmm.
say Adrian Peterson has an argument. I'm not saying I agree with that argument, but there
Hmm.
can be made an argument. And then obviously we'll have to see, but I think Justin Jefferson can get into that conversation. He's already in the conversation, but it's going to take time to really cement his right to be there.
Yeah, and I thought it would take in the grand scheme of Jefferson being better than Moss, like we have to have like another 5 years minimum to decide that. But in terms of being a better Viking of all time, Justin Jefferson can clear that in the next 2 3 years, just because of the amount of
100%.
time that Moss was here. Um, but speaking of Adrian Peterson, this is not him. This is Alan Page. Kind of sad when you have to go back all these years to find like the best players in your franchise's history. So maybe we should give the Lions a bit of a break for being a pathetic franchise. But Alan Page, first ever defensive player to win MVP in the NFL, the center of the Purple People Eaters, the great top two, top three defensive line ever. Not going to argue if you say the best and have the purple shades on. Um, but yeah, Alan Page, I feel like we kind of talked about it before the show and we went over, or did we talk about it after we started recording? Did you go over the list before or after of the Mount Rushmore?
I did it while we were recording so people
Okay.
knew what we
Yeah.
were doing.
That shows where I'm at. You said Alan Page is like the one pretty much. If there's a definite non-negotiable, Alan Page is one of them. And I feel like getting him at 4 was great value out of this draft. So, or was it 4? Yeah, it was 4. Yep, it was 4. Take notes, Quasi.
Why you got to throw Quasi under the bus like
I
that?
just thought it'd be silly.
Well, it is definitely silly. And Alan Page, I believe, also was in the Minnesota Supreme Court too. Another
Hmm.
thing I learned from Yorktown. So, yeah, I can't. Anyone really on that Purple People Leaders line? I think Alan Page obviously was the leader, so he's the obvious pick. Uh, to your point, yeah, there's a little bit of purple shades in that, but I trying to think that or the Steel Curtain like have to be.
Yeah, that's the other one that.
And then a little ways down the list, you have the Wall of America, the Williams Wall, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
But I don't even think that's consideration for top two
No,
or three. I think that's
no.
probably maybe top 10. It'd be good. It's still great.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'd say that's has to be one of the top, if not the top defensive unit,
No, for sure.
especially up front ever.
And I actually almost met Alan Page. I'm gonna go ahead and say that I did, because
Oh
I was
wow.
in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Shout out to my Mid Atlanticers. Like 8 years ago, and we went to a Golden Corral because that's where you go for lunch on a vacation. And the waitress saw me wearing my Fran Tarkenton shirt that I had just bought at Broadway at the beach in South Carolina. She's like, "Hey, we just had Alan Page in here like last week. I waited on him." So I pretty much met Alan Page.
That is not even close to the
I think I
result
did.
of that story. You were in the
Well,
same place a month apart.
a week. Yeah, don't be crazy. If it was a month, then I definitely wouldn't have met him. But I met him. It's the
Okay,
same
a week.
logic.
It's
Like
not. That's not how it works.
my mom did stuff for like country stars back in the 90s, and like she wasn't a groupie. She just
Okay,
she was a
just
catering
you.
leader person, and
Yeah,
she
don't say your
babysat.
mom did stuff for country stars.
Yeah,
Watch
yeah, I
yourself
shouldn't have
there.
done that. Rest in peace, Angela. But
You would have trapped yourself on that one too.
I already did. Rest in peace, Angela. She babysat Miley Cyrus, so that makes Miley Cyrus my big sister.
I don't know if that's
I think it's the same logic.
I don't know if that's true.
I think it's the same logic.
That's like me saying when my when I toured US Bank Stadium 2 days after the Thanksgiving game, I played in a Thursday night primetime game against the
You did.
Patriots.
You did.
I don't.
Isn't it so much
Okay.
cool? Isn't it so much cooler to say you did though? Life is
Yeah, it
too
is, but
short.
it's also a lie.
That's fine. We let ourselves
Yeah.
sing "It's the Year" every year. What's the difference?
Haha. Well played. All right. So Alan Page.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do your second? Did you do your third pick, or
No,
we got to go
I
there?
didn't.
Okay.
Sorry, I was reminiscing about
You
me and
threw
my.
me off so much
Yeah.
on your way of explaining how you met someone
Well,
without meeting them.
I was thinking about my time with my good friend Alan. My next pick. This is where it kind of gets hard because like
Yeah.
there's no wrong answer, but people are gonna see and be like, "How can you have him?" Because I've got two or three names in my mind right now that you probably also have, so I won't say any of them that I'm not choosing. I'm gonna be a young man and choose Adrian Peterson, MVP, last running back to win an MVP. I don't know how many times in NFL history. Well, I don't know how many times in recent NFL history a running back has full fledged carried a team into the playoffs the way that he did, going to the playoffs with Christian Ponder. They didn't really do anything in the playoffs, of course, so it doesn't matter that much. But no, Adrian, one of the best pure running backs of all time. And if you're like me, you kind of forget how good he was, which maybe makes my argument for him being on the Mount Rushmore at the spot like less legitimate. But just go back and watch Adrian Peterson highlights if you haven't in a while, and you'll be like, oh, right.
Yeah. I saw I forgot what the context was, but I saw the rushing touchdown he had. I think it was in Washington like 3 years ago when he was
Mm-hmm.
playing for the Commanders, and I forgot like he could still kind of run. He couldn't move like he used to, but
No.
in a straight line he could just still take off, which is still really impressive. And it made me go back and watch highlights from 2007, 2008, 2009. 2012 was him at his prime, no doubt, but yeah, I think physical. That's why I think there could be an argument as far as like best offensive Viking, putting him in the conversation with Moss, is because like I don't think the Vikings have ever had somebody so purely insane from an athleticism standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Moss could
Yeah,
jump and run with the best of them, but I he murdered William Gay. He
that was awesome.
broke a tackle in Cleveland and then stiff armed a man not to the point where he pushed him off. He literally open palmed, moved the man from his right side to his left, and threw him down over the sideline,
I can't
and then
believe we're
ran for a
bringing up.
touchdown.
I can't believe we're bringing up assaulting gay on Pride Month.
You, as I said that, I knew that that was gonna be your
Hmm.
response,
Hmm.
and I just had to keep going.
My
So
favorite part
you,
is when he screamed afterwards.
oh yeah, yeah, it
That
was
was
like an
awesome.
anime scream.
That was
It didn't,
electric.
yeah, that was. I think in reality, what? Because it was like a dump off pass, and it was like maybe like a 10, 12 yard gain, something.
But is
It
one of the
wasn't.
most violent 10, 12 yard gains of all time.
I'll tell you what was violent. Me watching that game
Oh, I
with
thought we were going to go
my
somewhere else talking about
no
Adrian Peterson and violence.
me watching me watching that game at my buddy's house. Second mention of my buddy Stefan, whose entire
Hmm.
family's from Pittsburgh.
Same.
Um, yeah, that I was I was not happy with it. That was a damn good. That was one of those games that year. Even though you lost, it's still one of those classic games. That
Hmm.
was man.
We
You're
were
making me reminisce about 2009
we
Vikings
were
football now.
undefeated. We were undefeated going into that game. We were either 6 or 7-0
I
because that was
remember
5 year one.
I remember watching at the bottom of the screen to check the Saints score because I believe at the
Hmm.
time we were the two teams undefeated in the NFC.
That game, that year as a whole, well, I mean, that year, yeah, that sets a standard of success. But like when you're, so I was like 9 or 10 years old. So that's when I can like really start to understand kind of what's going on. That year really like was perfect to set up my disappointment meter for the Vikings franchise, but it also ruined my expectations out of Vikings running backs, which luckily, like we looked up with Dalvin Cook after Adrian, but still, like there's, I don't know if there's gonna be another Adrian on the Vikings ever again. And I
I
went
don't know
into
if
a
there'll ever
Twitter,
be one in the league ever again. I just think the
maybe
running
not.
back position's
Well,
just entirely different.
I think of, oh man, I don't want to say what. Mm.
Do it.
Derrick Henry's 2,000 yard season might have been more impressive than Adrian's just because of the era that we're in. Much different era passing league. I didn't want to say there another be another Adrian on the in general because Derrick Henry, of course, Adrian had the speed and the power. Derrick Henry doesn't have the elite speed that Adrian had, but like Derrick Henry was comparable to Adrian Peterson. He wasn't as good, so I can't say there's never going to be another Adrian Peterson ever again. Maybe with the way football's going, maybe not, because running backs aren't coming up like that anymore. But I don't want to say there's never ever going to be another Adrian Peterson. Given all the context around Adrian, maybe not. But running back, I don't know if that's true.
That's yeah. I don't know how I feel about that one. I mean, look, Derrick Henry is incredible, but I think Adrian coming off that injury, and also who was the
Fair, that's
quarterback
fair.
in Johnson's 2,000 yard year? Was it Tannehill?
And Derrick Henry's,
Derrick Henry. Sorry. What a
mm-hmm.
yeah.
It was Ryan Tannehill. So he definitely had a better quarterback, but again, like the
I was gonna say
league,
not by much, but in the grand scheme
mm,
of things, by much.
no,
Like
yeah.
yeah, yeah, like
I'm just
it's
saying
not
in
I'm not
the
drafting either of those guys to my startup
yeah.
franchise, but if you put a weapon to my head and said pick one, yes, it's Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, it's the era that we're the Mahomes aired out era that we're in. A running back getting that kind of production in a vacuum is more impressive than one in the 2010s, early 2010s getting that. I think Adrian's was more impressive because of the injury and everything. Like you take all that context into account. Yeah, give me Adrian, but give me Adrian over. Let me be clear. Give me Adrian over Derrick Henry every day of the week in terms of NFL running back. But I'm just saying, I can't say that there's never going to be another Adrian Peterson because there very well could be.
I'm trying to look right now. I wanted to double check. Um, I think the craziest part is if I remember correctly, AD didn't even start off that season as like the main focal point of the offense because I think they were trying to, in comparison to what
Hmm.
ended up happening at the end, ease him back in. And people forget Percy Harvin was also in the MVP conversation for the first portion of that season.
Mhm.
Like that was a Christian Ponder like did fine because all he had to do was either hand off the ball or throw it like 3 yards and just get it in Percy's hands.
Yeah.
But all right, your list. Damn, I'm really mad you won that coin flip because you're able
Mhm.
to do some cool stuff. I'm gonna bring
Mhm.
in a ball knowledge pick. I don't think if we were just to post our Mount Rushmores on social media, I'd mine
I,
would look real
th-
sexy
I
with
think
this
I know who
pick.
you're about to take, and I'm really gonna be really mad if you take him.
Well, remember I get 2 picks, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I
save
know.
my ball knowledge pick.
Okay.
And then I've done. Funny thing is I was like, yeah, let's do anyone other than let's do people other than players too. And I'm just gonna exclusively do players because once you pick Bud Grant,
Mhm.
I realized really what do I pick Jerry Burns for the press conference? No. Do I pick Dennis Green for a few great seasons? No. Mike Tyson, Brad Childress certainly aren't in the conversation. So I
Mhm.
realized I kind of shot myself in the foot there. We'll save the true ball knowledge pick for my last pick, but I'm gonna go with John Randall because I mean, being we people I know that like Adam Thielen being undrafted, and did you know he's from Minnesota and he went undrafted is a great story. He's going to be a Vikings Ring of Honor member. Somebody tried to fight me over that fact the other day. I'm like, man, the internet just needs to freaking calm down. We need football back.
Mhm.
But John Randall, dude, and I'm not just saying this because my leader of work kindly paid for a John Randall cameo. By the way, pause. Little bit of a Vikings offshoot here. My good friend who's also a Vikings fan I work with, apparently she sent him a list of potential players she could get me a cameo from that were Vikings players on Cameo. Some of the names on there. And he said John Randall was by far the easiest pick. I was like, show me the list. Chad Beebe. Nick Mullins is currently on Cameo. I
Nick
take
Mullins has
do
been
with that
electric.
AJ Rose. That's a practice squad running
Oh
back
my
you haven't
god.
heard about in a little bit.
Oh my
I
god.
will get the full list. It was interesting to say the least. But John Randall, 100%. I mean, I being a Hall of Famer after being undrafted, I think I want to have it here. So, signed with Vikings in 1990, played into 2000, so 10 or 11 full seasons, 3 weird years in Seattle that we just don't really count because those just don't count. But I think it kind
Oh,
of speaks for himself
yep.
there. 137 and a half sacks.
As an interior defensive lineman.
Well, he kind of moved back and forth a little. I
Yeah.
think he started off at the edge and then moved into
Mhm.
the defensive tackle position. I think he could have played any position on the line. I think even in today's game, he could be, one of those outside linebackers. I don't know. Picking him and taking him out of time in his prime and putting him in Brian Flores's defense would be interesting. But
Mhm.
fortunately, kidnapping somebody from 30 years ago is illegal and scientifically impossible.
Yeah.
Ball knowledge pick. I'm really curious if you and I are on the same page. But Paul Krause.
Oh, dang it. Yeah. I thought I could wait
It
on it.
here's the I was sitting there was a game of chess. I was like,
Mhm.
which one of us is gonna play the game? All time NFL leader in interceptions, I believe with 81.
It's never gonna be broken. Ever.
Never.
No
I
one's
think the
gonna
next
beat it.
closest person's 2 off, but like let me bring up that list because I'm very curious how many and this is one of those things where you could argue that it's not impressive that somebody will never break it because quarterbacks are better. You know what I mean? You could say, well,
Mhm.
of course nobody's ever going to break this. Um, no player will ever have a chance because quarterbacks back then were just awful. So Paul Krause had 81. Emil Tunnel had 79. Rod Woodson, that's not that old in the grand scheme of things.
Mhm.
71. I think Charles Woodson at 65 and Ed Reed at 64. Darren Sharper's on this list.
Uh-oh.
That's a name. 63. Yeah, you don't want to see him on a list.
Mhm.
63.
He's
And then
definitely on
really
some more lists.
yeah, and then going down, really just a bunch of OGs. But as far as modern names, Like you don't even see Troy Polamalu on. Like you know what I mean? Like they're just not there. Some of the guys you consider clear Hall of Fame safeties, defensive backs in the last 20 years can't ever even come close to this. He's one of those players that if you know the history of the team, you know how good he was. I think it was a center fielder too. Well, didn't he play pro baseball
Pretty sure.
or got drafted? Yeah, and he played the position that way. If you've heard the name Paul Krause, but you're not super familiar, you haven't really seen, like, not just that he would get interceptions, but when I mention him being a center fielder, he would play safety like a center fielder. His
Hmm.
ability to spot the trajectory of the ball, identify the hang time, how long it's going to be up there, and lay out to pick off passes. I think if you were to hypothetically translate him to today's game, he'd still be a top safety. Do I think he'd have 81 picks? Probably not, because there is an argument to be made that quarterbacks now aren't what they were. Like they are going through insane amounts of training and all those things to make sure that they're not throwing as many interceptions. But yeah, Paul Krause definitely has to be my number 4 pick.
Yeah, and you want to talk about eras. You kind of touched on it. Like Paul Krause was in that era where they're definitely chucking up more balls, pause, just and not I don't want to say Hail Marys, but
Well,
quarterbacks are
technically, the Hail Mary hadn't been invented yet,
yeah,
but it was against us.
very much so.
Tying the Vikings content together.
Yeah.
People say we
Hmm.
don't talk about the Vikings enough because we'll
Hmm.
go on like a minute and a half tangent. See, that's tying the threads, baby.
High production podcast. Quarterbacks are much more calculated now, so that is an argument. But like Paul Krause, 81 career interceptions back then is ridiculous. For context, we touched on like current future Hall of Famers having like nowhere near close that many picks. Harrison Smith, which should be a future Hall of Famer, he probably won't be if Harrison Smith makes the Hall of Fame because we know how the NFL is. It'll probably be in 15 or 20 years from now. I again, not me saying I think that's what should happen. I don't think he should be first ballot because he's probably going to be coming out with some big names, but he should be a Hall of Famer within his first 5 years of eligibility. Harrison Smith is the current active NFL leader in interceptions because he's been playing for 12 years. So it's a bit of a longevity thing, but he's been one of the best safeties in the NFL in that time and came up perfectly along with the evolution of the current passing league that exists today. Harrison Smith has 35 interceptions. Like he has around 40 to 50 less interceptions than Paul Krause and is the current active NFL interception leader. So if that doesn't put it into context for you how crazy Paul Krause was at tracking balls, pause. Uh, there's really no other way to explain it.
As good as the Purple People Eaters were, it's not the same without his ability to lead the defensive backfield to take advantage of rush throws. Like there's a number
Mhm.
of factors, like we both hit on it. Quarterbacks weren't as good. They weren't going through these crazy like uh what's the term I'm looking for? Hand-eye coordination trainings and all these crazy simulations. It's wild. But if the quarterbacks are already maybe not up to modern standards and you're getting attacked by the Purple People
Mhm.
Eaters, you have to have a guy who can make sure those balls are going to be just thrown all over the place. Pause. But you got to have a guy who can actually go track them down.
Very true. Very true. This is the last pick, isn't it? As a whole.
Yes, yes. This is your last pick. I
Yeah.
think I know where you're going on more of a technicality and who's left, but I'm
Yeah.
curious.
I'm not gonna. I mean, I was sitting here a little bit trying to overthink it, but I'm not going to. It's Chris Carter.
Yeah,
Um,
I
if
thought about it.
we if we would have left him off both our lists, that means that we both don't have him as a top 8 Minnesota Vikings player of all time, and that would be frankly ridiculous, and we would probably have to end doing this.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's not much to say left. Chris Carter arguably is a greater Viking than Randy Moss, and I wouldn't blink an eye at that. But Chris Carter, one of some of the best hands in NFL history, gets more underrated as the years go on, and his playing career gets further and further away. But yeah, easy. It is a technicality, but it's right. It should be Chris Carter.
yeah. 12 seasons, 11 seasons.
11 seasons,
I
I believe.
yeah. I there's no I considered just being a real a-hole and taking both of them
Hmm.
because obviously the competitive
Yeah.
aspect. But I think there's an argument to be made either way, like we said at the start, and like I said, talking about Randy, like there's no wrong answer. But if both of us are going to have two separate lists, he damn well better be on it. So I was hoping you were going that way because,
Yeah.
like you said, any form of legitimacy we have to talk football in any sense would have been immediately gone.
Yeah. So Carter, what he was he an undrafted free agent to Philly, or did they draft him, or was he a fourth round pick,
Fourth round
or
pick.
did we trade? I forget.
Fourth round pick. I'm
Okay.
kind of cheating. I want to make sure I had Paul Krause's information up
Yeah.
correctly, so
Yeah.
I do have the Vikings Hall of Fame list up.
Hmm.
And I just clicked Carter when you said that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So he
that was
started
my
with
dad's
Philly.
favorite player.
Oh, mine too,
100%.
and
Here,
rightfully so.
I'm gonna do an awkward 10-second pause. Hold on.
Okay. I don't know what he's doing, but it better be good. Man, that chair looks like it is not comfortable back there. That lamp also sucks.
So I know people who
I
follow me on
I
Twitter
kept
and
him
stuff.
entertained. Don't worry.
I don't know what you did. I know people who follow me on Twitter and stuff kind of know this story, and obviously for a podcast that likes to keep it light. But my dad's the reason I'm a Vikings fan. He passed away quite a few years ago. But this bad boy, the old Reebok, where's my camera at? The old Reebok Chris Carter jersey.
I've got
I will say this:
I've got one too.
Fanatics. People bash Fanatics, but I'm really glad they went away from screen printing. Where there's my camera. I was looking at the wrong camera. Like this, where
Hmm.
the holes are in the jersey. I anytime I watch a game at home, I keep that next to me. It's kind of like I'm not superstitious. I'm definitely superstitious, but yeah, I felt weird picking Moss over Carter for that reason. Like deep down in
Hmm.
my soul, I felt guilty. But if you're going to ask 90 random, not 90, 100 random people on the street who aren't Vikings fans, what wide receiver do you think of when you think of the Minnesota Vikings? 90% of them are going to say Randy Moss.
Hmm. No, I agree.
Again, you could say Justin Jefferson now, but historically, it's Randy Moss.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
real
If you
ones
ask
will
like,
say Troy Williamson.
yeah, real ones will say Laquan Treadwell. I don't know.
So I agree with you. Either way, you can't be wrong with those two.
So
Any
true.
who
Do we want
let's
to
let's
go
do a
over
couple
honorable mentions
honorable
now?
mention
Now,
now. Am
now.
I delayed?
There's a little. I got a
Okay.
little late. I think we're back.
All right.
Yeah, we're back.
Two honorable mentions each. We'll just go back and forth.
You want me to go first, or do you want to
Yeah.
go first since I went
No,
first?
I mean it's honorable mentions. It doesn't really count. So go ahead.
Yeah, true. Um, I feel like this is even harder than filling out the top four. Do I want to be a young man again? Uh, uh, I'll just say Harrison Smith. He's my favorite football player of all time. So, like I said, he probably won't make the Hall of Fame for a while if he does make it. But if again going back to like Bud Grant being a Viking, I think Harrison Smith should be this generation's that's a Minnesota Viking because he's proved it the last couple of years now with taking substantially less money to stay here. When
Yeah.
he has every right to go to Kansas City this year, especially this year, to go chase a ring, but instead he takes a heavy pay cut.
I can't argue with that. He's probably the only guy on the current roster I think deserves that designation, other than, again, a few years
Hmm.
from now. I think Justin Jefferson will obviously be in that conversation, but just right now, it's Harrison Smith. That's the way I look at Jefferson is the same way I look at O'Connell. Everything tells me they're projecting to be on this list at some point. But looking at the legacy, especially for a team with the winning percentage we have, oh, no trophies. Yeah, we get it. We know. But still, at the same time, there's been a great legacy of
Hmm.
players. I have to think of a former teammate of Harrison Smith's who, speaking of Hall of Fame snubs, Jared Allen, dude, what the hell? I think that for that defense,
Hmm.
he looked the part, he acted the part, he drove the entire energy. like the Williams Wall isn't, or Wall of America isn't what it is without Jared Allen. Like it's just not. I think from that
Hmm.
era, when did he show up? 2008, 2000, no, 2007, 2008, somewhere in that range. Maybe, yeah, it was
Hmm.
06. I don't know. Somewhere right before 2010. He completely changed the culture of the team and that defense. I don't think he'll be waiting long. Well, he shouldn't have been waiting this long for the Hall of Fame, but there's some great players coming up lately. Um, I
Hmm.
don't know if he'll get the recognition he deserves when he deserves it, but he's a surefire Hall of Famer at some point.
Zero arguments. He came across my mind for sure.
I don't know if he deserves to be on the Rushmore because compared to somebody like Harrison Smith,
Yeah.
he did I mean, he signed with the Bears after. I mean, criminal offense there, but no, he's in that conversation, and I think
Hmm.
we're starting to see that era of Vikings fans, especially like super active on social media, things like that, who don't really have a
Yep.
perspective. They were like a couple years old when he was playing, which is
Hmm.
crazy to say. But Jared Allen for sure is an all-time Vikings legend,
And he wore number 69, which is awesome.
which is hilarious. Fun fact, if you are also in Phoenix or the Phoenix area, he owns a bar called The Lodge in Tempe, which shows Vikings and Chiefs games. So check it out. He's
There you
there
go.
sometimes.
No Panthers or Bears games. I wonder why.
Yeah, definitely wants to relive those days.
Hmm.
All right, who's
I
your second
guess
honorable
my
mention?
last honorable mention is gonna be. We want to talk about greatness. This is a multi-sport athlete that maybe should be on the Mount Rushmore and would maybe be up there with Randy Moss for best athletes of all time, if not better. It's going to be defensive tackle Brock Lesnar, multiple time UFC heavyweight champion, multiple time WWE champion, whatnot. Apparently likes to get pissed on by women or vice versa or something, so he's in hot water for that. But my actual last honorable mention is I'm going to cheat a little bit because it's two people, but it's the Williams Wall.
That's not okay. Whatever. You can have it.
Thank you.
You can have it.
I thought about Steven. I thought about Steven Jordan, but I was like, maybe
You
not.
can have it. Oh man, I'm going back and forth between these last two. Cause one was much better, and Vikings fans know this man pretty well. And the other, I think, is more of a Vikings fan deep cut, but he was just, you know what? I was gonna say Antoine Winfield, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna
Yeah,
say Jim Kleinsasser.
nice.
Not for talent reasons, though he is
Mm-mm.
talented, because I would definitely pick somebody like Kyle Rudolph above him as far as tight end. He was also a fullback. He just, I don't know, that offensive scheme was weird. But like,
Mm-hmm.
he was a Viking, like 19, like 12, 13 seasons. Like, he was there for, so 99, so we would have been there for 41 Donut. He was there for the return of Brad Johnson. He was there for Gus Farrat. He was there for Tavares Jackson. He was there for Favre. I think he was there for Donovan McNabb. Like this guy, when you think of guys who were, again, we're not talking to the same talent level of Harrison Smith, but who just say, hey, this is my home, this is my team. Jim Kleinsasser was just a dude who did whatever was asked of him. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying he's a top 10 all time talented Viking, but I'm just saying the vibes, Jim Kleinsasser, just for the vibes. And also,
Yeah.
50 first dates, if you even get what I'm
That's the
referencing.
first thing I think
Yep,
of when I think of Jim Kleinsasser's 51st dates.
100%. I've been doing the Vikings Player of the Day series, and I was like, I'm gonna throw Jim Kleinsasser on here. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
really hard to find Jim Kleinsasser specific highlights, but you know what does come up? That scene.
Yeah. Did it break out when I said, like, the feed break up when I said, when I think of Jim Kleinsasser, I think of that scene?
It did not break up. That's why I responded to what you said.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure
It's kind of
because
how it
that's all.
works. If
All
I
right.
was,
Well,
if I was responding,
the screen literally went black, so I didn't know. Like, and you were frozen when I was saying it. So,
we're gonna start a GoFundMe to get us a studio, I think. Hey, should we start a GoFundMe to get you to the home opener for the Vikings?
I'm kind of loaded, so I don't think you'll need that.
Okay, good. Because I was gonna recommend to save money on tickets, use code JasonH on SeatGeek, but
Hmm.
apparently since you're just rolling in the dough,
Yeah,
not needed.
yeah, I'm not broke, unlike people that watch this probably. So, oh, Chad Greenway in the running? Because he wasn't like that good, but Audie Cole maybe.
You have to put Antoine Winfield above Chad Greenway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's a
Like,
player.
there's
Antoine Winfield's just better.
is he in the running? You could toss his
Chad
name. I
Green,
mean, I'm
like
not gonna
if
laugh at you tossing his name out there,
he's
but
in like
like,
15 to 20.
I don't even know if it'd be that high. I'd maybe
Yeah,
say 30.
again, it's purely like, oh, that guy's a Viking. Chad Greenway is.
Funny thing
Yeah,
I just noticed, by the way, if you look at the Vikings Hall of Fame player list on their website, they definitely take the high ground and did not throw Brett Favre on there, even though they could have easily done that to piss off Packers fans.
they should have.
I think while I respect the approach and them trying to be good sports, they definitely should have put him on there, and they should have put an image of him on Monday Night Football at the Metrodome.
As a fan of the Vikings, that would have been awesome. But like, if the Packers did that, like to a Vikings player like that, I would think it's the stupidest, corniest thing of all time.
Who's a former Viking
Well, no,
Hall of Fame player?
I'm
But I
saying
don't
if
even. They all even come here, baby. And Packers fans are like, have our sloppy seconds. I'm like, there's a reason they want to go somewhere better. Duh.
yeah, well let's replace Chris Carter on my Mount Rushmore with Greg Jennings then.
Ryan Longwell.
You know what?
I don't think you're considering Darren Sharper enough after looking at his all-time
Yeah.
interceptions ranking.
Let me think about Gary Anderson. He didn't miss a kick for 2 years.
Why are you doing this? Why
Sorry.
is this happening right now? Why? You just have to throw out. Were you weren't born yet when that game happened.
So true. I'm not old.
I'm
What were you, like 4?
no. I was 6.
6? Oh, sorry.
Big difference, Bucko.
Yeah, yeah. You're only slightly more cognitive.
What?
You're only slightly more cognitive.
I know it was a.
You were only slightly more cognitive.
I've heard you the first 3 times.
Oh,
All
that's very
right.
cognitive
Well,
of you to recognize it.
I hate to admit it. I think your Mount Rushmore beats mine because I let you have Bud Grant, but I also think I think the Paul Krause. Those who know ball will respect that pick.
Paul Krause, like in terms of draft position value, Paul Krause is. I thought about doing that instead of Adrian,
I don't
but
know. Getting Carter at pick 4 was pretty solid for you too, though.
yeah, that was pretty good.
But I wanted the
Shout out
ball
to
knowledge
Fate.
points. Yeah.
Very good.
All right.
You're so smart.
Well, if you have not had a chance, it'd be very weird if you're watching this random off-season Mount Rushmore ranking episode and not the Mackey episode we dropped last week. But if you
Yeah,
haven't
good
watched
job.
that for some reason, go check it out. It's our best work yet. I know that's probably an extremely low bar, but it was a really great time. We're working on some other guests here through the off season. Thank you guys for watching. We know that you guys are excited for Vikings football, and there's not really a whole lot to talk about. I think the big news this week was the official team photographs coming out. What did you think of that Will Reichard picture of him just big goofing 2 inches away from the camera?
Pure unadulterated sex. That's what I think about. That's what that picture gave off to me.
I don't know if that's quite how I would identify it. I just think it's really funny to imagine this walking off
Mm-hmm.
the field on like a 60-yard field goal. He
Mm-hmm.
looks like Greg from Succession. I've seen people say iCarly. I think I was a little above the iCarly cutoff. But very much Greg from Succession vibes.
It's yeah. I can. I, I don't think I can hate him. I really don't.
I don't. I don't. I think it's. I mean, we can very easily hate him if he misses an extra point
I still might
because
not hate him.
That loyal already. Hey, well, remember my twin, John Parker Romo, he may be our starting kicker.
Yeah. I may not be rich.
Trying to figure out what the implications of that joke were.
Means
One
I'm
thing I
rich.
do want to say, because we have to make our weekly Lewis scene mention.
Oh,
Apparently,
how could we forget?
apparently Theo Jackson has been widely reported to have been the most impressive player all of camp. So the real question is does Lewis Cine end up on our active roster this season?
No. No.
You don't think there's any team out there
No.
who just needs a special teams
Oh,
body? Not
any
our
active
active
roster?
roster,
Oh,
a active roster.
I still think those chances are incredibly low. Like, incredibly low.
I know we were talking about that in one of our Vikings Twitter group chats, and somebody made the joke, watch him go off for like 2 games with like the Cardinals or something. And that would be the only reason I see that happening is because it's the most sensible Vikings outcome possible. He'll
Mm-hmm.
go and have 3 or 4 games somewhere where he looks moderately serviceable or good, and like as a gunner or something, or have a random pick. But I'm actually, some people are mad about Theo Jackson having an impressive camp because it means Kwesi didn't do well with the first pick, but like I'm extremely happy because that means we might have our next up after Harrison leaves. Like, how is that a bad thing?
If it's a perfect world, maybe.
I mean, look, I'm speaking to a pretty big what if, but
Yeah,
like if he's even we know Harrison Smith's not going to be around forever. Having somebody who is even decent at safety, guaranteed to be able to step in if he can be that, is a huge win compared to just drafting and hoping for the best as we've seen.
very true. Very true.
With that, just incredibly smart and unique football deep
Mm-hmm.
dive insight. Do you have anything else to say, Brev?
No.
That is the first. With that, we'll see you guys next week.